All right, let's go ahead and move on to our 9:05 a.m. item 6.3. It is a public hearing. A, consideration of lease financing by the County of Lake and Lake County Public Financing Authority, the authority, to provide financing for certain public capital improvements seated as the Lake County Board of Supervisors and Board of Directors for the Lake County Public Financing Authority. B, seated as the Lake County Board of Supervisors, consideration of resolution of the County of Lake approving proceedings by the Lake County Public Financing Authority for the issuance of lease revenue bonds in an initial aggregate principal amount not to exceed $25 million. C, seated as the Board of Directors of Lake County Public Financing Authority, consideration of resolution of the Lake County Public Financing Authority authorizing the issuance of lease revenue bonds in an initial aggregate principal amount not to exceed $25 million. And we have Mr. Carter and team.
Good morning, Board. Stephen Carter, Assistant County Administrative Officer. With me today, I have Patrick Sullivan, the Treasurer Tax Collector, and Genevieve Harrington of Auditor Controller, County Clerk, and Bobby from K&N, one of our contractors. And online should be Scott from Jones Hall. Ferguson, sorry.
Yes.
Just in case there's questions related to legal. So on July 16, 2024, your board provided authorization for staff to explore two options of financing for the Armory repurposing project and directed staff to bring back final bond issuance documents for approval. That's what we're doing today. During that meeting, you also approved the fund balance general reserve debt management policy and Lake County Debt Advisory Committee policy. It's quite a mouthful, but those are very important policies. In the time since, we have worked with both K&N and two separate law firms to work on these documents, and that's why we are here today. And I would like to turn it over to Bobby for the presentation related to this.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Spadier, members of the board. Bobby Chung, K&N Public Finance. Is that too loud?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Usually you want to speak right into it, but it was coming out just fine.
Okay. I have a brief presentation today that summarizes the progress made to date. Okay, great, thank you. And I could just click.
I think you have to scroll.
Okay, great. Okay, as a quick reminder, I am from K&N Public Finance, the county's municipal advisor, and it's my job to help provide advice and assistance when the county so desires to interface with the debt markets. As Mr. Carter said, your board approved conceptually moving forward with this project at your July meeting. And since then, we have worked with your team to build the financing team. We went and did many RFPs to select bond counsel, a disclosure counsel, a trustee, and we've developed over the last couple of months this set of financing documents that are on file, which are necessary to complete the financing. So what you have before you today is a series of two resolutions, one for the Board of Supervisors and one for the Financing Authority Board, that basically authorizes staff to complete the financing given a certain set of parameters that are within these two resolutions. I'm going to talk briefly about the plan of finance on the next page. The plan of finance will generate $20 million for projects, primarily the sheriff facility armory renovation project, but also generate, if there are extra funds that could be applied towards other capital projects, basically within the next 3 years. The bond transaction will fund a debt service reserve fund equal to 1 year's maximum annual payment and pay for all of the cost of issuance necessary to complete the financing. And so the table on the right has the sources and uses where the sources consists of the bond par amount that we are anticipating will be issued, the bond premium, which is generated as a function of the actual sale of the bonds. That generates total sources of $21.8 million, and the total uses consists of the project fund deposit, the reserve fund, and the various cost of issuance. We're estimating that the true interest cost, or the borrowing rate, based upon current market conditions for a tax-exempt, fixed-rate, 25-year bond is about 4.23% in this market. The bond transaction will have level fiscal year payments, which is detailed on the following page, with principal being paid annually each June 1st, starting with June 1st, 2026, and interest will be paid semi-annually each December 1st and June 1st, starting with June 1st, 2025. The lease revenue bonds will be callable at the county's option after 10 years. So at that point, should your board decide, you could either refinance the bonds at lower interest rates if market conditions permit, or you could simply use cash on hand to pay off a portion or all of the debt thereafter at that point. Since this is a financing structure based upon the county's ability to lease property, we are leasing the sheriff facility to be improved and the existing county jail facility as a part of this transaction. And the goal is to price the 2024 lease revenue bonds via a competitive sale once we are ready to do so. The next slide has a lot of numbers, but it is the estimated schedule of principal and interest for the full 25-year term. And as you can see, we have a small stub payment of interest in the current 24-25 fiscal year before the level debt service payment when you take into consideration both the principal and the interest over time through the final maturity. A couple of key credit highlights. Your management team met with representatives from Standard & Poor's, a credit rating agency, back in October. Last time I was here, I talked a little bit about the criteria that the rating agencies use to rate public agencies and these types of bonds. S&P actually rolled out some brand new criteria in early September. So their new criteria kind of has 5 different buckets, each weighted equally: management, financial performance, reserves and liquidity, debt and liabilities, and the economy, each of those buckets being about 20% of the rating. And so we made a presentation that kind of hit on highlights in each one of these categories, including the financial management policies that you adopted at the July board meeting where you approved moving forward with this project. We talked a lot about your budget process and how your actual budgetary results over the past couple of years were very positive. We talked about the county's strong fund balances and reserves, pension, OPEB status, economic highlights, your zero debt burden before this issuance, and some of the cybersecurity and disaster preparedness that the county has adopted in recent times. We don't have the credit rating yet, but we anticipate it being issued quite soon. We were just waiting for some further diligence on the title sites, on the title for the sites that we're using for the lease financing. The next slide is the same timeline that I showed during my July presentation. And as you can see, several of these key milestones have been completed. As I've talked about, developing the financing plan, determining the method of sale, evaluating assets, developing the stack of documents before me, meeting with the rating agency. And so today we are here before your board seeking approval for the transaction, and yet to come are to finalizing the rating, posting the preliminary official statement, and actually pricing and selling the bonds into the market. The next slide is just a brief picture, snapshot of where interest rates are generally. This is a chart of the bond buyer 20 bond index, which is a tax-exempt index of a 20-year borrowing rate going back to the year 2000. So as you can see, the current rate right now is about 412, long-term average 409. So as rates have fluctuated over time, we are right around the long-term average today. So we're not in a very high interest rate environment. We're not in a very low interest rate environment. We're right at the 24-year average for rates. In terms of next steps, we are asking for the adoption of the two resolutions today. After that occurs, assuming that it does, we will receive the credit rating, finalize credit enhancement, which is bond insurance. That's really a mathematical exercise to see if it's economic or not to purchase a bond insurance policy, given where your credit rating will come out. Post the preliminary official statement, bond pricing, and then bond closing. So that wraps up my prepared remarks, and I am here to answer any questions for your board.
Thank you very much for being back here and your presentation. Any comments or questions from board members? Supervisor Green.
Yeah, just a background question, because I wasn't here in 2011, and this is probably for staff, but on the two resos, the Public Financing Authority originally dates back to 2011 and included Lake County and Lake Osan. But I don't have that JPA in front of me, so I don't know what the original purpose was of it when it was founded, or if we're operating within the four corners. I'm going to assume we are, because we have a perfectly good JPA that does public financing. But I guess my question is, what happened back in 2011 when we first founded this puppy with Lake Osan? What level of debt service is already existing within that JPA? And are we in fact able to use this JPA to do debt financing for something that is not a sanitation project?
So some of that I will actually defer to Scott, who's online right now. Jones Hall is actually who is one of our vendors for this project, and they wrote the document back then. Do you want to take it, Scott?
Sure, I can take that. Good morning. I'm Scott Ferguson with Jones Hall. We're the county's bond counsel for the financing. So the JPA agreement does authorize the authority to issue debt for either of its members, being the county and the sanitation district. This would be the first time, in my memory at least, that the authority's been used to do a general fund financing for the county, but it is within the authority of the authority. It's got very broad ability to do financings for both the county and the sanitation district. And just the other thing I would add is that any debt of the sanitation district that the authority facilitated doesn't affect the ability to do debt for the county. It's a separate credit, and there are no limitations bleeding from one onto the other.
All right, so follow-up question. So although the Lake Osan is referenced in the resos, it's the JPA itself that we're sitting as the board of today to do the approval, and we don't need any separate approvals sitting as the board of Lake Osan, and we don't have to demonstrate any purpose with the original JPA and the financing of the sanitation district. I assume it was some sanitation-related project that we initially formed the JPA to do.
Correct.
Yes, and it could also be that the sanitation district was a readily available existing entity, since the JPA does need to have two public agencies as members. So, but that's correct. The no approval of the members of the JPA is required for the authority itself to do financings. And the reason the county's acting in this transaction is because the county is the other party to the lease financing. So Lake Osan doesn't have any role and doesn't need to have any approval for this financing. That's correct.
And I appreciate the question. I had the same question yesterday, reviewed the resolutions that created the JPA, and I think there was just foresight that in the future there may be some needs for public facilities or infrastructure outside of Lake Osan. And so the way it was crafted was that both have the ability to access, because it is a little confusing, but I think it's only in the recitals that it just brings back the history. It's not involved in the signature page or anything like that for Lake Osan.
So in your inquiries, do we have any outstanding debt service apart from what's before us today? through that
Outside of
JPA?
Lake Osan, there is no debt service to the county
Okay, thank you.
at this moment in time. I don't believe there's ever been any debt service engaged in by the county outside of Lake Osan. This would be the first.
Definitely not general fund.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? So I do have a question. I apologize that I didn't have this question yesterday. Suddenly, it hit me as we were talking about this process where we started back in July, that we did a policy. And in the policy, if I'm correct by what I'm reading, it says that the county shall strive, granted it says shall strive, not limit, to have general fund lease debt service be less than 8% of general fund expenditures. And I'm going to give a number, but it's only the number that I believe I know, that we're within the range of 90 to 100 million in general fund expenditures on our annual basis. And so we're looking at almost a 20%, which is way above and beyond the 8. Like I stated, it doesn't say that we shall not go beyond 8, but it just seems strange to create a policy that says we shall strive not to, and the first thing we do is break our policy and go twice as much, if not more than twice as much, into that percentage that we already set into our policy.
Bobby has an answer to that.
Yeah, Chair Spuddy, I believe that 8% is a annual debt service figure, not a total par amount issued. So
Gotcha. So it would be the 1.4,
1.4,
not the 20 million.
yeah,
Gotcha.
correct. So I think we're well within.
I appreciate that
Yeah.
clarification.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just provide my input. I had some hesitations and some concerns last time when we discussed this. I still have those same concerns. I understand the need, but I also feel that in my opinion, if we are going to go into debt service, there has to either be a dedicated revenue stream that pays off that debt service, or there needs to be a return on the investment that we can expect to see our revenues grow. An office building, in my opinion, does not equate to increased revenues. It does equate to better comfort, maybe better welcoming to the community, to those office buildings. But I'm just concerned. We are already seeing a decrease in granted, that might help us refinance in the long run, but we are seeing a decrease in the interest rates, which will probably impact our overall investment portfolio. And so that number that we've seen grow will probably see either a absolute flattening or possibly a decrease. We'll see in our next report what that looks like. But I just, that's $1.4 million a year that we don't have a specific dedicated fund. And in my opinion, that means either A, we take away from services or take away from other growth that we were looking to obtain. That again, I think would be focused on revenues being increased. If this was a economic development project that we were doing a debt service for, to me that would be less risky than to develop an office space. So I'm going to stand where I was last time, and I just wanted to at least express that, and I will leave it at that. Supervisor
Can you
Price?
talk about the payments?
Yes, so the payments, this would be the maximum. This is not where it will land. So once everything is completed, we'll either do an informational only to the board or come back as a board item to tell you what the actual amounts are. So this is a max, but the way the policies that your board approved in July, anything above the ongoing revenue, which we always have in between 10 and 20 million of fund balance available. The first shot at that money is always debt financing, and then anything else like capital assets, which are vehicles and all of that. So in the 20-plus years that I've researched, there's never been under about $7 million of that carryover, so there has always been at least the 1.4 to cover this cost. On top of that, we were planning on creating a reserve, like we have the building and infrastructure reserve, those kind of reserves, a reserve of at least 1 to 2 payments, so that if there is a year, let's say, that is an absolute disaster, and we have no FBA, which would be pretty darn dire, we would still have 2 years' worth of payments available to us at any second.
Okay, thank you for that response. Actually, I did have one other question. In the memo, it speaks to and other public projects, I believe. It speaks
Correct.
specifically. Can you speak on that? Is that just for future things that will be brought to the board? Is that things that are already in the thought process of adding it to the, because here it says up to 25 million. We're not, says not to exceed $25 million for the debt service. We're talking about 20.
You're approving 21 only, so it will never go above the 21.8 that, from the presentation. We're not going to go above that. That just, the document provides room just in case we needed it at the time. So what your board is only approving what is before you today, which is the 21.
Okay.
Bobby has something to say.
Yeah, Bobby Chung. Just to clarify, the resolution permits the par amount of the borrowing to be up to 25 million, but it's our understanding that the bond will fund $20 million of project needs. And we need some of that cushion because as a function of the sale of the bonds, that bond premium amount is a little bit variable. It won't be determined until we actually price the bonds. So we wanted to give ourselves a little bit of cushion. But the understanding is that we're funding $20 million of project costs under this set of assumptions.
And going back to the 20 million, the Armory project is expected to be about $18 to $20 million. If we go out for the 20 million, there is a list of projects that we submit with the bond, that if there's any leftover, we can use it for those projects. So there's already 10 specific projects that have been listed out. One is the courthouse and the purchase of the 4th floor back and remodeling for about $6.5 million. There's the jail phase 1 of $2.7 million. So that's an expensive roof over at the jail. And there's also $2.5 million possible for one of our museums to actually retrofit it and refurbish it. There's a few other, I believe the other 5 or 6 are roofs that are in dire need of fixing.
Okay. I appreciate that. Just to clarify, I get it that we have a specific number we're looking to do and we need flexibility, but our approval would be for not to exceed 25 million, because that's what we're stating today.
That's correct.
As a board. So if you did spend 25 million, you would have the ability to do so, just by the vote that we are giving you. We're not saying limit it to the 20 million. Our specific action is not to exceed 25 million. Would you come back to us if it was 22 million or if it was 23 million because of that flexibility?
I absolutely would.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because we're saying 25 million, but you're saying 20, and there's something in the middle here.
Where I'm going with 20 is that's the amount that's coming to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and everything you're approving today is the 20. Anything above the 20 to 25 is a buffer for all of those extra costs related to borrowing. And it's estimated at 1.8 million. And it just gives the buffer just in case it's slightly higher or lower. Not that we plan on
rates.
going out for 25 million.
For rates and payments and things like that. It's not so you can say, oh, this project's going to take all the way
We're
to
not
25.
adding projects or anything.
Well, yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
Okay.
So we're halfway down the road on this Armory project, and we don't have the funding to do it. And so the options are proceed with this type of financing or drain reserves and
it would drain all of our reserves other than the one general fund reserve, and I don't know that we quite have 20 that way. And then it would take 5 to 10 years to ever replenish those funds. I don't think.
Dangerous option.
Yeah.
Just said that's a dangerous option.
And Patrick actually has some numbers if he would like to share them about where if we keep 20 million, how much we would earn in interest versus how much we'd be paying on interest.
Yeah, I would just highlight some of the comments I made at the previous meeting that, I mean, it's hard to know exactly with rates, but right now our pool rate crossed 3% for the first time in a long time, or at least I'm aware of. So even in that middle range, if our rates weren't to go higher at the pool level, in about 20 years, it would approximately break even with the amount of interest charged against that bond that we're looking at. Fact is, probably with rates coming down, what we're currently expecting is that by the end of next year, our earnings will probably level off. I mean, if rates were to stay the same, our pool would catch up to the current rate at that point. It takes us about 16 months, 18 months to cycle up to the current rate levels. So if we were to go higher, that 20-year mark would slim down. But either way, for the most part, if we get the bond rate we're looking at, this is not a huge difference, one way or the other, between what the pool can earn and what we pay per the bond interest. In the long term, in most scenarios, we actually come out ahead in terms of borrowing the bond, borrowing the money through the bond. If it were shorter, that might change things. But the model we're currently looking at, with the scenario being discussed today, it's probably financially beneficial to borrow the money, keep that cash on hand for two reasons. One, for the potential earnings, but more importantly, for our liquidity and the safety of our portfolio. That ensures that we don't risk running short on cash, that we don't have to sell our other holdings early or borrow money in the short-term market, which is not good for us. So holding on to that cash, keeping it on hand, I mean, that would certainly be my recommendation.
And that where I said it would use all of our reserves to do this project, if anything came up like an emergency roof of 2.7 million for the jail, we wouldn't be able to pay for it. Where if we kept it and earned the interest, we would have that money available for those projects if and when they come about.
Thank you.
Just
Vice
one more
Chair?
thing, and if, let's say hypothetically, like when, we were able to receive funding from different federal, pots, I guess you could say, like ARPA, things like that, and funding was able to be utilized for some of this, what we're talking about, some of these projects, this keeps us from having to use this funding, right? I know we said this possibly, but.
Correct. So any money that we use ARPA, or if we were able to get a grant for, let's say, the solar piece, that leaves, you can use like that funding instead of the bond, and that remaining bond money can be used for those other projects on the list.
Okay.
So yes, you can still go and should still go out for possible grants, et cetera. And it does not preclude using it.
All right. Thank you for those questions. Let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this item, please come on up to the microphone. And I'm going to start in Zoom. We have Benjamin Hiddle.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I really appreciate you guys doing this, and I know it's a lot of work. I also appreciate, Mr. Sabatier, your idea that we should have income coming in from some other source to cover everything, and would like to see a bond related to a renewable energy initiative focused on jobs more than jails. And I know they're both important, but I believe if we do a long-term $20 million bond on a solar project, the revenue is far exceeding anything that is been discussed today, and would love the community to look at not just a solar project, large scale, either on the landfill or another brown site, but also increasing our biogas utilization for renewable energy, which will both of those projects bring a lot of jobs. So thank you for your time, and this is a great conversation. The last thing I'd like to end on, if we're really financing stuff, if we look at a Bitcoin chart over a 10-year plan, which you guys are talking about, it far exceeds everything here, relates to security in a short and a long term, and hope that we look at that in our portfolio. I did put that in a comment about 6 years ago as well, about the Bitcoin in the community's portfolio. And I think Bitcoin was at $5,000 then. So it's not a joke to look at other avenues beyond traditional financing. And especially to Mr. Sabatier, thank you for concluding we need to create revenue to pay for these. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you for your comment. I believe that we are very limited in what we can invest in, and I do not believe we are allowed as a government agency to invest in Bitcoin. I'm getting some nods all over here. But always looking for new ideas. Anyone wish to speak on this item?
I will say about the solar that we're putting on this project, it's going to save a lot of money over the course of the life of the asset, because it's going to cover hopefully all of the PG&E costs for 25 years or so. I'm going to say forever, but no.
Well, we know the sun will probably still be there in 25 years, so it'll be helpful. Seeing no one getting up and no further hands on Zoom, I'm going to bring it back to the board for some action or further comments. Either one.
Sitting as the Lake County Board of Supervisors, I offer the resolution.
Resolution has been offered
Mr. Chair, just to,
with a pause.
yes, for clarification, that would be under item B, the resolution is being offered under item B.
Yes,
Yes.
as the Lake County Board of Supervisors and not the Public Financing Authority.
Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Green?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska? And Supervisor Sabatier?
Nay.
Sitting as the Board of Directors for the Lake County Public Financing Authority, item C under the recommended actions, I offer the resolution.
Yes.
Director Simon?
Yes.
Director Crandall?
Yes.
Director Green?
Aye.
Director Pyska? And Director Sabatier?
Nay. And it passes. Thank you very much for bringing this to us.
Thank you, board.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.